Tonight, I'm asking for the vote of every single African-American citizen in this country who wants to see a better future. Look how much African-American communities have suffered under Democratic control. To those I say the following: what do you have to lose by trying something new like Trump? What do you have to lose? I say it again, what do you have to lose? Look, what do you have to lose? You're living in poverty, your schools are no good, you have no jobs, 58% of your youth is unemployed. What the hell do you have to lose? America must reject the bigotry of these communities of color only as votes, not as human beings worthy of a better future.
I brought in some mutuals to help explain this point. I know y'all hear me griping about this enough, but I brought in some mutuals to help with this point.
I don't understand how you don't understand the pain the Trump administration has caused. You have to know in your heart that this administration, in particular, has acted illegally and unconstitutionally in ways that have weakened our democratic institutions, wrecked our economy, rolled back protections for public health, the environment, not to mention healthcare and social security benefits. Okay, all of that.
Well, Leonard, maybe you should have did everything in your power in 2024 to prevent this shit from happening. But you have one of the biggest platforms reaching out to so many fucking people, and you dropped the ball on talking about the severity of Trump and his administration. There were so many people with these big-ass platforms taking it for granted, treating it like fucking sports, treating it, oh, you need to demand more, you need to demand this. This was not the election or time for this. Knowing that Project 2025 was on the cusp, they dropped it. It was 900 pages. We kept warning people, and everyone said, you're fear-mongering. That's not going to happen. Why would they drop that? That's never going to happen. All of our rights, we've earned this. This is our American right. Knowing damn well these people wanted to strip and take all of this away from us. You had the platform, and you should have known the severity of this, but you fucking did it, and you dropped the ball when it mattered most. So we don't want to fucking hear your words now about, oh, millions of Americans are being affected. When you had the chance to prevent all of these millions of Americans from being affected, you dropped the ball with your platform. So it's fuck you and go to hell.
And I'm gonna make a point to say that we forgot about all of you who were loud and wrong, that was advocating and voting for that man, saying that you were gonna vote for that man with your chest out, especially if you're black. Especially if you're black. Now, we can say, or we can argue that immigrants that didn't know any better, or they just voted against their interests because of their anti-blackness. But if you were born in this country, grew up in this country, and you are of the lineage, it's like you have no excuse for those few. Now, granted, 92% of black women voted on the right side of history, and 80% of black men voted on the right side of history. But there's still a percentage of black men especially that have been loud and wrong, are loud and wrong, and are still advocating for this damn man till this day. The hell? I see some of them running for political office right here in Illinois, and it's like, do you think that I'm going to cast a ballot for you? And you were responsible for this in your mind. Something's wrong with your mind. But I've always said that those who rock with Trump, they have an affinity to him because they resonate with him. Either they're an ex-con, they're someone that's con artist, they're cheating people out of money, they're racist, and if they have the melanin, then that's some self-hate going on there. Because if you black and you actually pull that lever for that man, you got to do some inventory on yourself because you are a traitor to your race. Now this lady, I follow her. She's mutual, chef's kiss, and how she is explaining this. You know, he said, what the hell? Do we have to lose? Okay. Black Americans, the black American men that still ratting on, you know what? What do we have to lose? All right, sister, go ahead, take it on over. And y'all be sure to follow her. She has great talks on politics.
As a result of the Supreme Court's decision, Donald Trump first took office back in 2016, Black Americans have lost major protections in the courts and through executive order. And a lot of people who stayed home, voted third party, or treated 2016 and 2024 like a protest, they did protest votes, they helped to create the conditions for all of this damage that Black Americans have been left to deal with. He sits up at that podium smugly asking, what do Black Americans have to lose, when he knew there was a plan to strip Black Americans of everything. There is the case Shelby County versus Holder, which gutted preclearance under the Voting Rights Act. We all know about the Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard. That ended affirmative action in admissions. And then yesterday we have Louisiana versus Callis, I believe it's pronounced, which narrowed voting rights protections when it comes to redistricting. And that is just what the Supreme Court did in 2016 and in 2024. Let's move on into the executive orders that Donald Trump has put into place. There's Executive Order 1415, which ended radical and wasteful government DEI programs and prefacing. It just basically ended DEI for federal programs, offices, positions, and any other type of activities that they deemed is DEI. And then there is Executive Order number 14173, which they labeled as ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. He revoked this one. And it was for equity-oriented federal actions, and it pushed agencies to eliminate discriminatory preferences in DEI-related enforcement. He also revoked Executive Order number 11246, which removed the federal contractor non-discriminating affirmative action framework that had long helped police hiring discrimination. And then he implemented an executive order on documentary proof of citizenship that adds a voting barrier, critics said, would disproportionately burden Black voters and other eligible voters. So in the Supreme Court, rolling back protections, he's also doubling it up by way of executive orders. I included the executive orders number so that you all could go back and do your research and read up on those executive orders and educate yourselves on how to best protect yourself. Please do that. The more you know. We can't forget about what he did when it came to the environment, right? He implemented an executive order, titled it Environmental Justice Rescissions, I believe. Look for that title. I couldn't find the executive order number, but that executive order was implemented, and it stripped away federal protections that were aimed at communities, Black communities, low-income communities that were overburdened by pollution and toxic chemicals, all of that stuff. Yeah, he implemented an executive order to cut all of that out. So to you racist white leftists, you never Kamala people, you uncommitted people, you third-party voters, you non-voters, you Trump voters, your protest did not happen in a vacuum. When you stayed home or you helped split the vote or you voted for Donald Trump, it is Black communities that ended up. We are paying the price. We lost protections. We lost enforcement. We lost ground in places where racism was already doing damage to us. So don't tell me, don't tell us that elections don't matter when the policies that followed had consequences for our lives. If you wanted to make a statement, fine. But be man enough, be woman enough to admit that it was Black people who were going to pay the price for your actions. It was the Black community that is going to have to be left with the fallout. And for all of you Asians, Latinos, other brown people, all of these protections, these regulations that are being overturned and rolled back, those affect the Black community. And what affects the Black community, it affects you too. That's it. That's all. The end.
But you know, here's another take.
But on the issue of race, on the treatment of African Americans specifically, even being terrible at what they're doing has still proven to be disastrous for our country. And it is, in part, the posturing from the White House and the president. That is stuff that validates and excites the worst bigots in the country, and that is consequential. But it's more than that, too. We are now about 16 months into what has been, from day one, a concerted and intense targeting of Black Americans, specifically by this president and by this administration. On his first full day in office, he proclaims war on diversity efforts, not only in government, but in any institution in the country over which he can exert leverage, everything from schools and universities to law firms to private businesses of every stripe. He then immediately started firing some of the highest profile Black public officials in the whole U.S. government, seemingly regardless of any other thing about them. I mean, right away, we get the firing of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Charles C.Q. Brown. We get the firing of the Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden. And then it's Gwen Wilcox from the National Labor Relations Board. And then it's Robert Primus, the chair of the Surface Transportation Board. And then it's Alvin Brown from the NTSB. And then it's Peggy Carr, the head of the National Center for Education Statistics. And then it's Willie Phillips from FERC, from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And then it's Lisa Cook from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, and on and on and on. When Trump and his top political donor, Elon Musk, then started just lopping off huge swaths of the federal government to disastrous practical effect, the largest and most egregious cuts targeted federal agencies that employed a disproportionate number of Black employees. Reporter Erica Green wrote about this a few months ago for The Times, noting that nothing had moved backwards in the federal government for Black Americans this quickly or this far in over 100 years, since Woodrow Wilson came in 1912 and resegregated the federal workforce. Quote, Black employees were fired or demoted to lower-level jobs, relegated to separate and inferior lunchrooms and other facilities, and accused of making white women feel unsafe. Those who remained were humiliated. A Black worker in the Postal Service was surrounded by screens, so white workers would not have to look at him. Another employee had a cage built around him to separate him from his white counterparts. A clerk in the Treasury Secretary's office was assigned to rewrite all correspondence to address Black employees by their first names. The way Trump addressed the Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden, by her first name, when he crowed publicly about firing her for no reason. In the year of our Lord 2025 and now 2026, this president and this administration is not just inheriting that history from the Wilson administration, it's furthering it in its own ways. Since 1965, there has been an executive order in effect. It was signed by Lyndon Johnson, 1965. Since 1965, all federal contractors have been banned by executive order from discriminating on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or national origin. Donald Trump rescinded that 1965 rule on his first full day in office. Less than a month later, Trump announced another rule change. They rescinded Clause 52.222-21 of the Federal Acquisition Regulation, which doesn't sound like much, but I'll tell you what the title of that is. It's Prohibition of Segregated Facilities. That's what Trump rescinded less than 1 month into being back in the White House. That section reads, quote, the contractor agrees that it does not and will not maintain or provide for its employees any segregated facilities at any of its establishments, and that it does not and will not permit its employees to perform their services at any location under its control where segregated facilities are maintained. That anti-segregation clause has been in government contracts for decades. Donald Trump overtly reached out to rescind it, which means bluntly that the federal government no longer explicitly prohibits contractors from having segregated restaurants, waiting rooms, and drinking fountains. Make America great again, right? Recently fired and sidelined employees in the Department of Housing and Urban Development have started sounding the alarm that the Trump administration is no longer, just bluntly, no longer enforcing a federal law known as the Fair Housing Act. Fair Housing Act, another pillar of the civil rights movement and its achievements. Fair Housing Act dates to 1968. It says you can't refuse to rent to someone or refuse to sell a house to someone on account of their race or their color or religion or national origin or any other factor against which we're supposed to be protected from discrimination. According to current and former employees of the Department of Housing and Urban Development under Donald Trump, they have dropped enforcement of the Federal Housing Act. In Trump's first year back in office, black unemployment spiked in this country from 6.2% all the way up to 7.5%, making it the highest of all racial groups. Under Joe Biden, black unemployment had been at a record low of 4.8%, spiking now under Donald Trump. The Trump administration, generally speaking, is bad at its work. It is bad at what it sets its mind to, in all sorts of ways. But black Americans, African Americans, have been targeted by this administration in a concerted way that has nevertheless been devastating, even though the Trump administration isn't good at anything they set their mind to. And that was all before the conservative majority on the U.S. Supreme Court, including all of Trump's appointees, voted to effectively end the Voting Rights Act a few days ago. As soon as the court said they would take up that case, people started mapping the worst case scenario for what Trump and the Republicans would do, particularly in the South, if the court gutted the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the crowning achievement of the civil rights movement. And the before and after looks like the snapback after the end of Reconstruction, after the Civil War. I mean, look at the state of Louisiana there. A third of the population of Louisiana is black. Louisiana's Republican governor canceled congressional elections that are already underway in that state to rush through new maps that will presumably make sure that even though 1/3 of the population of that state is black, there will be no black representation in Congress for Louisiana at all. South Carolina, a quarter of the population is black. They have one majority-minority district represented by an African-American Democrat, Jim Clyburn. They are going to try to get rid of that one black district so that South Carolina is all white, all Republican in representation, while a quarter of the people who live in that state are black. In Tennessee, 1 in 6 residents is black. Republicans now want to make sure all 9 congressional seats in Tennessee are white. All 9 of them. They want it to be 9 to nothing, white and Republican, when 1 in 6 people in that state is black. In her dissent from the majority ruling, Justice Elena Kagan said it will likely cause the largest reduction to minority representation since the end of Reconstruction. She probably didn't need to use the word likely there. The war on black Americans that is being waged by this president and this Republican Party is one of the only things they have put their mind to in this past year that they've actually done pretty well at. A comprehensive attack on black public officials and black public power. A comprehensive attack on black public officials in the federal government, black employees in the federal government, black representatives in Congress, and now all around the country, where everywhere Republicans are in charge, they are scrambling to make sure that black public officials can no longer hold office. We're going to talk tonight about the pushback against that and the strategies to make them pay for it, both in Louisiana, which is ground zero here, and around the country. We're going to talk tonight about the takedown of Trump and the administration in federal court in Washington in a most unexpected case. But big picture here, we are in the middle of something really radical in this country. Not just to get rid of our constitutional republic, to replace our form of government with something else, but to get rid of the multiracial democracy that our Constitution is supposed to protect. It is a war on black America. The fight to save it is looking like it's going to be the fight of all of our lives. More on it tonight. Stay with us.
Well, 92%ers, 80%ers, I know we'll be fine. We're going to keep pressing on because we have our ancestors' blood. It is a smack in the face. It is. We're exhausted. We're already tired of this same fight. We're already tired of trying to just get other people to act right, to not be awful, to treat us as humans. That's all we've been asking for here. Like the song says, we're going to keep pressing on till victory is won. We're going to be all right. And the rest of y'all, I really hope you're having the days you voted for.